Hello World Wide Web, I'm Dr. Shadow, the internet personality with the best hair. Now, few things are as iconic as Godzilla, but one thing I think, at least, should be considered as such, and that is the tendency for America to take Godzilla and do whatever the fuck we want with it. Of course, the '98 Godzilla comes to mind there, but let's not forget just how much was changed around in the original movie when it was released stateside as Godzilla King of the Monsters, starring Raymond Burr. Even Godzilla 1985 is a re-edit in much the same vein, and the original Japanese Return of Godzilla has never been released stateside, though it's said that may change this year. Hopefully studios will eventually figure out that if you have a good movie, there's no reason to change that. But we're not here to talk about a re-edit this time. We're here to look at an original work. Godzilla! 2014. The legendary Godzilla. This is going to get really confusing. Why do they just keep naming them Godzilla? The thing is, this is a different studio with a different idea of how to take the iconic monster and reimagine it for a Western audience. Also, possibly because of the negative reception of the last attempt, they might have overcompensated a bit, as Zilla was smaller and sleeker than Godzilla, while this time the monster is ridiculously huge and bulky compared to the original design. Not to say people still didn't have things they wanted to complain about. What, you ask? Well, let's take a look at Godzilla 2014. Legendary. That one, and find out. The movie starts out trying to get us in the mood with some good old-fashioned real-time government censorship and footage of nuclear explosions. This before we suddenly transport ourselves through time, forwards by the narrative, backwards in reality, to 1999, where people are surprisingly not freaking out to the non-threat of Y2K, because there's a far more definitive disturbance in a Philippine mine, which demands the attention of Ken Watanabe, playing our lead science type.
Dr. Serizawa?
Ishiro Serizawa, named after both the director of the original and the scientist from that movie. Though that's pretty much as far as it goes. It's just kind of a name drop that lasts the entire running time, because he has absolutely no relation to Oxygen Destroyer or anything like that. He also has an assistant, Vivienne Graham, played by Sally Hawkins. Her job, it seems, is to follow Serizawa around and agree with everything he says. In any case, they make their way down to the collapsed mine, finding stuff. I found out outside the theater, these dark fucking sections of the movie remind me more than a little of the presentation of Requiem. But the point is, while the workers detected radiation and were hoping to find uranium, instead they discovered strange gigantic eggs, one dormant and one that evidently has hatched. You'd think, having come in on helicopter in the first place, they would have spotted that before having gone underground, but they just didn't have the orchestral score yet. You gotta pace these things. Whatever it was, it made its way into the ocean, and in a Godzilla film, all oceans lead to Japan. Of course, in an American Godzilla film, all monsters land on Americans, so we find one of those rare American families living in Japan, the Brodies. Sandra, played by Juliette Binoche, Joe, played by Bryan Cranston, and their son Ford, played by C.J. Adams. Ford may sound kind of an odd name for a kid, but he's in Japan, and the rest of his classmates are named things like Suzuki and Nissan and Honda, so it's all good. Cranston here is playing an engineer who works at a local nuclear power plant, and since picking up very strange patterns of seismic activity, he's been a bit too preoccupied with work this morning to pay attention to his kid, going off to school without a happy family send-off, and also not even realizing other important things going on right now.
Must be something we're not thinking of.
Happy birthday.
What? Is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I forgot all about it.
But I can't really hold that against him, considering when I first saw this, I didn't even realize he had made a name for himself in Breaking Bad. Well, I don't watch TV. That's a show on TV, so therefore, I didn't see it. He's convinced whatever is wrong underground likely means they'll have to shut down the reactor at some point, so he preemptively tells his wife she better head down there before he even gets the meeting underway, so they can do that as efficiently as possible. Of course, once they get down there and the tremors get worse and worse, faster and faster, this turns out to have been an incredibly bad idea.
Sandra. Sandra.
I see. The monster must have eaten a Taco Bell or two on the way over. Faster than anyone anticipated, the whole plant starts being damaged, and even though Joe does contact his wife with orders to get out of the lower levels as quickly as possible, he still winds up having to close the security doors, trapping her and her group inside so they can peer through the tiny window and die horribly. A death that is so extreme it causes us to jump 15 years ahead to 2014. Here we find that evidently Ford moved to the United States and joined the military, now being played by kick-ass actor Aaron Taylor Johnson. I don't mean that he's particularly good. He is kick-ass. in the movie Kick-Ass. He's also a completionist in the game of life, having already married and having a kid right quick, introducing Ellie, played by Elizabeth Olsen, and his son Sam, played by Carson Bold.
I still gonna be here tomorrow?
Yeah.
How long until he's back in Japan? Hey, if he didn't leave until after midnight, technically he didn't lie to the kid, right? He came back to Japan because his father got arrested after dicking around in the quarantine zone again. Not sure how this requires Ford to fly down to bail him out, or how the hell anyone in his family can afford trans-Pacific flights at the drop of a hat, but we see while Ford might seem to have his life in order being all but ready to retire by the age of 29, it may be that he's just running from his past. The past that his father's still trying to get closure on.
Your mom's out there, Ford. To me, she'll always be there.
Frozen in place, looking through that window at me, shouting, "Why the hell didn't you get Akihiro to do this, you bastard?" Ford figures maybe he should just take his father back home with him to the States, but Joe is adamant about getting his discs that they left in their old house and solving this mystery. So, good enough reason, they boat in under a convenient fog and begin their search, finding very soon things aren't matching the narrative of it being a radioactive death trap.
Dad, are we going home or what? Whoa, hey, what are you doing? Dad?
Why is it as soon as the detector says things are fine, characters just rip their masks and helmets off right quick? It's just like, what if it's malfunctioning? You ever think about that? I want to see that in a movie. Oh, it says the air's breathable. Nevertheless, they make it back to their old house without much difficulty, and Joe finds the old-ass floppy disks that have been sitting here exposed to the elements for over a decade and a half. But it's Bryan Cranston, so he gets a free pass, and they still work. Not that he ever finds out, as they are captured immediately, but instead of being shooed out of the quarantine zone like normal, the security force decides to mix things up and bring them over to the center of the thing, complete with a giant fucking monster cocoon where the nuclear power plant should be.
7.2 seconds and getting stronger.
Wait. 15 fucking years and no one ever spotted that thing on Google Earth? This also happens to be where Dr. Serizawa has been hanging out, studying the phenomenon. The data from Joe's old discs is interesting in that it matches the anomalies they are currently experiencing. Turns out in a decade and a half studying the thing, no one else ever thought to check the data leading up to the destruction of the plant in the first place.
It affects everything electrical for miles and miles, and it is happening again. This is what caused everything in the first place. Don't you see that?
It's an American Godzilla movie. The solution to the crisis has to come from the States. They're just not allowed. It's the rules. Realizing the danger they're in if they leave the cocoon alive any longer, Serizawa commands the team to destroy it at once, with a huge charge of electricity. Yes, it's not like massive quantities of electricity have ever done nothing to stop a kaiju, or in fact help them before. Strangely enough, this doesn't work. Revealing the monster to the world, and its superpower, a motherfucking EMP blast! And some have said that it makes no fucking sense that an animal would have an EMP blast ability, considering they're supposed to have evolved this shit, and EMP doesn't do anything to organic things, so why the hell would it evolve an EMP attack? You see, thing is, this story is supposed to be kind of the power of nature, and nothing quite says the power of nature like, fuck your machines! As such, the monster tears through this place. Also, knocking out the electronics means the electric locks keeping Cranston in place are released, allowing him to run out into the middle of the chaos and get smashed in the debris. Don't worry though, when things clear out, Serizawa handpicks Joe and Ford to bring along for the new team, working to take on this threat. Of course, Joe's not doing so hot after having his everything broken, so only manages to get this out.
Go home to your family. Keep them safe.
You got Brian lying there, giving this touching, emotional performance to piano music. In the meantime, Aaron's just sitting there like, yep, right, family, safe, got it. The lack of material to work with gets to his father, and he dies shortly after, royally pissing off everyone who went to watch this movie specifically because it has Bryan Cranston in it. Maybe especially because it leaves us with Aaron, but either way, Serizawa works with what he has, and catches a lad up on the plot. His organization, Monarch, was actually set up to study and defend against giant monsters that evolved back when the world was more radioactive, and have since moved deeper into the crust to survive off the natural radiation of the planet. However, harnessing uranium has lured a few of them up to the surface, and the atomic bomb tests of the 50s were actually attempts by the military to destroy the creatures, such as this giant lizard motherfucker.
We call him Gojira.
Originally, Watanabe was scripted to say Godzilla at this point, but being a native of Japan, he kind of requested that they call it Gojira, and they were like, yeah, cool, that makes sense, and so he did, which was good. Except for the fact that for the rest of the movie, everyone else still just calls it Godzilla, even though he was pretty clear about this. Now that he's caught up on the concept of kaiju, they explain what happened when the one egg hatched 15 years ago in the Philippines.
The hatchling burrowed straight for the nearest source of radiation, your father's power plant in Janjira.
Wasn't there a closer plant in Hong Kong? Shut up! This is a Godzilla movie! The monsters are going to Japan! The cocoon was absorbing the radiation, so they thought killing it might release that and poison the area for centuries. However, the fact that Ford's father believed the seismic disturbances were a strange form of echolocation must mean the monster was communicating with something. Even though we could just call that talking, but either way, he has a plan.
Nature has an order, a power to restore balance. I believe he is that power.
Serizawa. Spoiler alert? This constitutes pretty much all the help they think they need from Ford, so while they work on tracking the escaped monster, or Muto as they've taken to calling it, Ford can be dropped off in Hawaii and find his own damn way home from there. Still America, so close enough. Problem is, it just so happens the Muto also felt like it needed a vacation. Not so much for sun and fun, as it's already dark, but at least some snacks and relaxation. They fucking eat nuclear missiles? Then wouldn't the events of the 50s pretty much just be a flashy pie fight? With the Muto in their sights, the army finds out in record time that the giant monsters are one of those things they're simply ineffective against. Now that we're about an hour into the movie, it's about time for the ocean to rapidly recede, signifying a tidal wave. A tidal wave of awesome, towering ass-kickery of insane proportions, as Godzilla has finally made their appearance, standing toe-to-toe with the Muto and ready to kick all the asses. Which we immediately cut away from to check on how the kid's doing. Seriously, the fight in Hawaii is seen only briefly in shaky cam news footage before we move on to the next plot point. Hawaii's been fucked up badly, but this gives Ford the chance to find the army men moving out in pursuit of the monsters and ask to tag along, because you can do that evidently. Where the monsters are going is worrisome, however, as Serizawa's theory that the Muto is chatting up with another reminds him of the dormant egg they found 15 years ago. The thing was highly radioactive, so rather than study it, they just threw it out.
The Americans, they took it.
Doctor, where is it?
Where you put all your nuclear waste.
The Senate? Or the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Repository in Nevada, which actually doesn't exist beyond the planning stages, but never mind any of that. It gives us another place for a giant monster to grow out of that, if you ask me, people really should have noticed a bit sooner than this. But plenty of people in Las Vegas figure out something's up. Revealing the second Muto, bigger, stronger, and female, tearing her way through Las Vegas, a setting so awesome for some kaiju action, it's relegated to a few news clippings and discarded soon after. Serizawa figures at this point the echolocation EMP chatbot thingamajobber was the male Muto in Japan communicating with the female pod so they could synchronize their growth and reach maturity together where they may reproduce and make even more giant monsters to destroy the world. He's also realized that this is a Godzilla movie, so Godzilla is the only one that can defeat these things. The US Army, however, is hell-bent on finally getting to use some of these damn nukes that we've saved up over the last few decades, so if a pie fight wasn't enough to kill him before, maybe a giant pie will do it. The plan is to get a nuke on a boat and take it out to sea, lure the monsters with the radiation before blowing them all the fuck up thanks to a clockwork detonator unaffected by EMP. How convenient. Ford just so happens to be an explosives technician, so this job is right up his alley. Problem is, of course, the army decided to transport the nuke completely exposed on a train, which results in the obvious outcome. those of you out there that can't see because the Blu-ray for this movie is dark as shit at some points, Ford and his friends were cut off at the pass by the female Muto, who then proceeds to teabag them. At least that's what it looks like to me. As such, the transport the missile by train strategy gets royally fucked up by the monsters, with Godzilla opting to sit this one out. Don't worry though, Ford survived the onslaught no problem, and they even get to continue the plan to get the bomb on a boat and take out the monsters. Of course, the Muto attack yet again, this time stealing the bomb they got set to detonate via clockwork, and taking it into downtown Los Angeles to nest. This means they have a new crisis. Thanks to getting an armed bomb involved that they can't disable remotely, they need to drop a team into the heart of the nest to disable the bomb.
I retrofitted that device myself.
Lieutenant Brody is the only EOD tech to survive the train attack.
Well, sounds like we could use you.
Did you really need to come up with an excuse this time? This whole movie, Ford's been like, hey, can I tag along? And you're like, sure, why not? With him on the team, though, they're sure they can disarm the nuke and save the city. The city that has already been stomped to shit and where countless lives have already been lost, but hey, it's the principle of the thing. Point is, after they land and regroup, they infiltrate the Muto nest and have a relatively easy time removing the bomb from the egg stalactite. Now to disarm the thing.
Let's get this cover off. Okay, Lieutenant, you're up.
It's not budging. It's sealed shut.
Resulting in everyone completely forgetting the whole disarming idea, and rendering Ford's unique abilities to be used in this climax completely moot. So it's off to plan B, throw it on a boat and get it as far away as possible. Of course, Ford can't leave well enough alone, and just because the Muto spawn can't survive without the nuclear food, that's no reason not to set the place to blow, killing absolutely every one of them, and royally pissing off the mother something fierce. Fortunately for him, before she can finish him off, Godzilla shows up and reminds us who is the king of the monsters. Kicking all the asses, taking all the names, breathing all the nuclear fire! Wait, if it's nuclear breath and the Mutos use nuclear energy to eat and heal up, then is it good for them? Yeah, this is not the point. The point is, while they were dicking around with having Godzilla fight all movie, now that the climax is underway, he can finally show his stuff. It was certainly a hell of a lot easier to see in theaters, though. This makes me think I should listen to those guys who say that Requiem was actually visible when seen in a theater, because damn, this climax is hard to comment on when now that I have this movie on Blu-ray, I can hardly see a damn thing. Point is, while Ford and miscellaneous army dudes fumble around trying to get the nuke on a boat so they can get it away from the city, Godzilla is beating everything to fucking death. And a building falls on him. Like, oh, I'm so convinced that might have killed him. Yep. But wait, he's back in action, saving Ford's ass! Again, and taking the last Muto down. Eating nuclear power, live. Having nuclear breath shoved down your throat, die. Okay? Okay. Point is, happy ending! The Muto are dead, and Ford collapses next to the nuke that will take him out as well as much of the coastline, so I'm happy. At least, until a magic helicopter appears, which somehow gets him and gets out of the way fast enough for him to survive. But it also means the nuke is magically out of the range of the coastline now. Oh well, I can't win them all, I guess. The point is, the people we're supposed to care about survived the crisis, even though they didn't really do anything to solve the problem. It was taken care of by Godzilla, who poses for Time magazine before returning to the sea. Making him the hero of the story, though not necessarily one that really gave a damn about humanity. It's just restoring balance. Kind of like a forest fire that takes place in a forest and doesn't consume entire cities. That was a bad example. Anyway, that was Godzilla 2014. And, it's got its problems, but I think it's still a pretty damn good movie. The main criticism you hear over and over about this is that it's a Godzilla movie with hardly any Godzilla in it. And if you want to compare it to offerings like Godzilla Final Wars, it almost looks like a reasonable statement. But when you actually quantify how much time Godzilla is on screen in this, it's greater than the average of Godzilla movies. That means if this has too little Godzilla to count as a Godzilla movie, most Godzilla movies don't count as Godzilla movies. I noticed something while watching, however, that might explain that sentiment. The filmmakers seem to be going for having a bunch of glimpses of the monster, all leading up to one big fight at the end. Cinematically, it worked out, but the problem was the plot at work here called for Godzilla to be involved in more fights leading up to the climax, and the way they handled this was by giving us a few seconds of a fight and then cutting away. It was pretty much a feature-length cock tease, where you know Godzilla's doing something you want to see, but the movie is opting not to focus on that. Once you get past that problem, though, the rest of the movie holds up relatively well. Yes, it focuses a lot on human characters, like pretty much every Godzilla movie ever made. The quality of those characters, though, is also all over the place. Cranston was the clear winner for interesting characters with a wide range of emotions and fantastic acting, but he's killed off within the first 30 minutes. Aaron's character is comparatively less interesting, having very little emotional range and then trying to display stoicism. When you're dazed in the helicopter and look just as aware of your surroundings as you normally are, that's not good. Finally, Serizawa and his assistant were pretty much useless, but at least Serizawa was an entertaining walking exposition dump. Vivian really didn't do anything at all for the whole movie outside of agreeing with Serizawa and getting really excited. Overall, though, while its flaws are numerous, there are countless accolades to praise as well, from the interesting creature designs, to how well the slow build-up worked to make the climactic battle feel that much bigger, and let's not forget how well the effects were used to portray the size of the creatures when so many movies these days have CGI that makes everything look like miniatures from how badly it's done. If you're interested in a mindless monster brawl, this won't do it for you. But if you're a fan of movies that use fantastic creatures to express the power of nature and the folly of man, you know, like the Godzilla franchise, I'd say give this one a go, coming in at 4 extra deadly nuclear attacks out of 5. They're also working on a sequel. I'm not sure what it's about, but, you know, I can dream. Godzilla vs. Godzilla. Legendary vs. TriStar. It's a short film. Thank you all for watching. I've been Decker Shadow, and remember, let them fight. And when you do, maybe show us a little bit.